Welcome everyone to the International Society for Organization Development and Change's webinar series. Today's webinar is called To Be Determined, Leading with Clarity and Confidence in Uncertain Times with your host, Brenda Reynolds. My name is Quang. I'm one of the moderators for the series. And for this webinar, we're going to use the chat rooms extensively to engage in conversation both with each other and also with Brenda as she's presenting her content. Your video from here on out will be turned off and the sound will be muted for this webinar. But I encourage you to continue to ask questions and engage in the chat room. I and my host will read comments and questions out of the chat room at appropriate times to share with Brenda so that she can focus on her content. Both I and my colleague, Dr. Kimberly Barker, will canvass the chats, just so you know, to share out the conversation. And with that said, let me turn things over to my colleague and co-host, Dr. Kimberly Barker, to get us started. Kimberly?
Thank you, Quang. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the International Society for Organization Development and Change, my amazing partner in making a difference, Quang Lee, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. We'd also like to acknowledge the ISODC President, Dr. Roland Livingston, who has joined us today. Hello. We are so excited about today's webinar and would like to introduce you to one of the most passionate professionals we have ever met, Brenda Reynolds. I absolutely loved her book, To Be Determined, leading with clarity and confidence in uncertain times, and managing your guide to managing business change with ease. Before we begin, we would like to get a sense of where in the world you are today. If you could post in the chat box where you are, that would be helpful. So we see New Jersey, Everett, Washington, Chicago, Toronto, Madison, Wisconsin, from London, Chelsea, Michigan. Yay, welcome everyone. Thank you. Also, can you share with us what perspective you bring today? Are you a student, scholar, practitioner, etc.? Please post your perspective in the chat box. Practitioner, I'm a scholar practitioner. Scholar practitioner and friend of Brenda's. Moving career. Changing careers here to OD. Yay, we need more OD folks in the world. Thank you very much. For more than 20 years as a respected organization consultant and thought leader, Brenda Reynolds has supported clients including McDonald's, Special Olympics, Sherwin-Williams, and the Nemours Pediatric Health System during times of transition. Through her consulting, coaching, training, and speaking, she equips individuals with organizations and with easy to apply strategies for navigating change, developing leaders, and creating resilient cultures. Brenda is a TEDx and Vistage international speaker whose passion is helping others realize that within every now what, there is a why not, ready to be unleashed. Welcome, Brenda Reynolds. Yay! Before we begin, Brenda, is there anything you would like to share or add to your introduction today?
I would add two things, Kim. One is, to me, how important it is for folks to Participate. I know participation is something that it's odd for me to not be able to see the faces and feel the energy of the people who are here, but we're going to try to transfer that into that chat room that Quang is so diligently monitoring for us. So this is what I don't want you to feel like during today's webinar. I really would like you to actively engage, and I'm going to be polling you on occasion and asking you questions as we go, so that I'm not talking to myself today. And the other thing that I would share with you is, I'm not sure, we've got people from all over the country on the webinar today. This is where I hail from. I hail from a teeny tiny town called New Berlin, Pennsylvania. And the way we know you are an outsider is if you don't pronounce it correctly, because we say New Berlin, not New Berlin. And it is a teeny tiny town with about 800 people in it, no red lights. And the biggest building in town is the United States Post Office, pictured here. And having been raised with a real humble beginning, you might say I was actually born into uncertainty. My parents, my mother was 17 when I was born, and my father was 19. So I was born into a lot of change and uncertainty, certainly in their worlds. And then having come from a small town, I think I was just raised with a gift to take complexity and make it simpler. And I tell you that because some of the things we're going to talk about today are actually big concepts that I'm going to try to boil down to you and put in simple, applicable terms. And that's just the way I do myself. I've always marveled at people who can take a topic and make it more complicated. I have not been born with that gift. You'll find in my book, I hope, my writing is pretty straightforward and simple. And so are my explanations. And I'll share more about that later in the program. But that's one of the things I'd like you to know about how we'll proceed today. The other reason I like to keep things simple, some of you may have been, if you were on the webinar last month with Dr. Shine, please say so in the chat today. But I remember Dr. Shine's webinar, he referenced a term that some of you may or may not be familiar with. It came from the military, and it's a term called VUCA, VUCA world. And that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And if you ask me, these times certainly qualify as being times of volatility and uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And so I'm all about trying to keep things simple for us today.
I agree. Brenda, could you tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book?
Well, I wrote it for two reasons. So if you go back to that little small town in Pennsylvania, it was in second grade that I had a teacher named Mrs. Wolf. I thought she was 80 at the time. She was probably 35. But what I remember about her is her going around the room and asking us all what we wanted to be when we grew up. And it was such a strange response as a second grader that I always remembered it. But what came out of my mouth for some reason was a novelist. You know, who knew? And for years, I've thought to myself that I said that to Mrs. Wolf in second grade. Someday I've got to write a book to live up to that. But I never knew what I knew enough about to really write a book until the time was right last year. And what I realized is that I had spent a lot of time working with leaders and teams and organizations over my career. And the one thing that I knew to be true was that so many times leaders get promoted from independent contributor roles into leadership roles where they're working with people, but they often aren't very skilled up in that. They aren't trained in it. It's not maybe even something they ever imagined themselves doing. And yet they end up in a role that sends a huge ripple through the organization. And they are so constantly faced with complexity and responsibility and uncertainty and change that I thought, gee, let me take some of the core concepts that I use every time I work with a client and make those really accessible to folks in a book that they could literally read on an airplane. and up level their leadership skills. And because I also found that, you know, these were skills that I have called on time and time again in my personal life, whether it's as a parent or, you know, someone leading my family. And so that's really how the book idea was born.
Awesome. One thing I really loved about the book is when you discussed transition fog, and you gave your TEDx talk on that as well. I had never heard that term before.
That's because I made it up. I sort of with a little bit of help. So let's talk about transition fog, and that is what I write about in the book. And I was really inspired to introduce that term through a TEDx talk because I'm a proud graduate of American University's MSOD program, along with Quang, although we discussed how much time there was between us being there the other day. And whenever things would get tough in that cohort group, which became like one big dysfunctional family at times, we would find ourselves saying, not another fog, which is a freaking opportunity for growth. And that stuck with me all of these years. And I thought about that, you know, when we're going through change and transition, it's a big fog. And so there are some principles, we'll talk about some of those today, for managing through that fog. To give you a little preview, here is the table of contents from the book. So if there is a topic that especially speaks to you today, I've got some things absolutely planned to cover, but if something is really up for you, let me know. I've also planned our presentation to be quite flexible at times. So wanted to introduce that to you. And then to answer Kim's curious question, where does this term fog come from? Well, it comes from those times in our life when we're asking ourselves, now what? And that can be the result of the change we planned and we saw coming, or the result of the change we never saw coming. And when we are asking ourselves, now what, often a big fog rolls in. And so we need to be prepared for it. And there are two sources of that fog. One is because we are sitting between how it was and how it will be. And we are squarely in the middle of uncertainty. And the uncertainty is unsettling. And it's just that not knowing what's next, not knowing how we're going to get from where we are to where we're going, that stirs up a lot. And it stirs up emotions like anxiety and worry and fear. And if I may share a personal story here, gang, I'm gonna be in full disclosure. It was in 2008 when I was both working as a consultant to clients, but going through my own transition fog and asking my own now what, when I found myself unexpectedly being divorced, in the role of a single mom with 2 little boys, a consulting practice, but no guaranteed income, no health care benefits, and at a real crossroads. And I still remember sitting in one room of my house at the time, literally with my face in my hands and wondering how I was going to get from the place I found myself in into some future that wasn't full of anxiety, worry, and fear, and in some space where I felt like I had comfortably landed into my new situation. But I can tell you, I could not in that moment begin to see the path forward. It was like a huge fog had rolled in over what up until then had been a really perfect life plan. And so some of my inspiration for writing the book was also to help folks, even in their personal lives, to navigate their transition fog. How do you do it? Well, what I've done is I've begun to think about how we actually drive in real life road fog. First of all, before I even go there, if you can relate to any time in your life, past or present, where you've been asking yourself, now what? And you think you may have experienced some transition fog, would you just give me a heck yes in the chat room? Or some version of that. I get it. I've been there now. I'm there now. Because I really want to help you to really take that situation, keep that front of mind as we begin to look at some of the tips for navigating the fog. In many cases, leaders and organizations are asked to lead themselves and others through fog. And in our personal lives, we're doing that for ourselves, our family, and our friends all of the time too, because life is just one uncertainty after the next, right? So think about how you navigate a country road in the fog, or any road in the fog, and the instincts that we use. Our first instinct is to slow down.
Brenda, we're getting a lot of comments in the chat room. Heck yes, there now, heck yeah, here now, going back to school, changing jobs during the fog, etc. We're getting lots of comments there.
And what I'm noticing too from people is sometimes it feels like when one thing happens, it's never just one thing. You know, it's two or three things. I was telling Kimberly and Kwong earlier today about my older son. He is getting married. His fiance is graduating from dental school. They are making a move. And it's all happening at once. Mm-hmm. So I think whether it's positive changes or the ones we really didn't ask for, we often get them in bundles. And so that's where the fog really, really comes in. And so we have to slow down. Just the way we do when we're navigating a country road, we slow down. And we think we're going incredibly slowly, and we think it's going to take forever to get to the other side and get to our destination. But the interesting thing is, once I started doing a little research, is that we really aren't going as slowly as we think we are in the fog, because our brain registers speed relative to our surroundings. And when we're in the fog, we can't see the trees and the buildings, and we can't see our surroundings. So the fact is, and I want folks to take solace from this, we're moving faster than we think we are. And that's true when we're navigating uncertainty and change as well. So I would say slow down and take comfort that that's okay. The other thing we do is use our low beams in the fog. Have you ever tried to use your high beams? It just obscures your view further and makes more of a mess out of trying to see where you're going. But in our impatience, we sometimes try to use high beams. Low beams are enough. They illuminate about 350 feet in front of us, and that's it. And somehow, just seeing that small stretch in front of us and navigating that road one small stretch at a time gets us where we need to go. And I find that's true in consulting. I know many of you are doing this, consulting to clients. Because sometimes, even as the consultant going in there, if we're honest, all we can see that the client system needs to do is what the next right move is. And then the next move becomes apparent. We can't always outline how they're going to get from A to Z. And I've actually told my clients to be a little suspect of a consultant who comes in and says, I can tell you exactly how to get to A to Z. Here's the path and here's how it's going to go. Often doesn't go that way. So those are some quick tips. Anything from the chat room you'd like to highlight for us at this time, Kwang?
Yeah, so we've got Roland who's saying, finding it helpful as I do more work internationally to slow down and pay attention differently. My mantra is do the next best thing. Annette Jensen wrote in praise of slowness. So yeah, it's resonating. Your comment about slowing down and figuring out what the next right move is resonating with a lot of attendees here.
And you know, Brenda, I'm always wary of the cookie cutter approach, right? When people come in and they give you, here, you just have to follow these 10 steps, right?
And it gives clients comfort because many people actually say, oh, that's great. You know, I'm going to use them because they know they've done this and they know exactly how it's going to go. But I can tell you, I've worked in a client system and watched them invest a lot of money hiring continuous improvement organization to do work in their system. And At the end of that process, then they hired me, because none of the changes, the cookie cutter approach got them doing certain activities, but what they hadn't factored in was the human element. And so none of the changes were sticking. And I can tell you, they spent millions of dollars on that. Yeah. And they were not factoring in the uncertainty, the wild card factor that had to do with how do you manage this change in light of the people who are going to be impacted by it.
Those are some of the most expensive binders you will ever purchase, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm here with Roland, right? So navigating the fog, I'm going to skip ahead here to this notion of fog being a freaking opportunity for growth. And this was the biggest debate I had with my book editor 2 years ago, which was what to do with the F in freaking opportunity for growth. But this is where we landed. And the thing about it is, we really are growing as we navigate through the fog. It just doesn't always feel like it. It isn't until we've helped our client system make some headway that we can then reflect back and look in the rearview mirror and realize just how far we've gone, And I really believe in navigating the fog one step at a time. So just asking ourselves, what is my next right move? And there's something about that that is comforting, because if we can just figure out the next right move, it keeps us from being immobilized and stuck. And so whether I'm working with a client or I'm managing my day, I will often, as a practice, wake up and say, what are the next right moves I need to make today to get further down the path of what I want to accomplish this year? Everyone's making New Year's resolutions. That's great to have that long view. But if you don't back it up with then some really short-term goals and next right moves, you'll never get to that destination. So this is the thing that I chose to spend some time talking about at my TEDx about a year ago. And there's more on this topic in the book, so I welcome you to check that out. There's a whole lot more I could say, but for this group, I want to be able to cover a number of topics lightly rather than take too deep of a dive in any one topic. So what's coming up? Anything you want to share here from the chat room, or any other questions that folks who are on the webinar have about this topic before we shift gears?
Nothing coming out of the chat room right now.
Okay.
One thing I'd be very interested in is learning about some of your key leadership teachings that you share in the book.
Yeah, and I really can't take credit for a lot of them. I feel like I'm a natural born connector. I like to connect people who I think would benefit from being connected. And so the book was my way of connecting people to other concepts and theorists that I think hold a lot of value. And these are concepts that helped me navigate my foggy time in 2008 and continue to help me as I consult to other client organizations. And so the first folks I want to give some credit to, if you're moving through change and uncertainty, you have to be ready to plan the change and plan to transition. And I give full credit for enlightening the world about this topic to William Bridges and his wife, Susan Bridges. And they wrote the very classic, timeless book called Transitions, and any number of books since then. I was speaking with Susan as I wrote mine, and she was very excited to be featured in it. And what they talked about is that even though we go through physical changes and steps during a time of change, the thing we also need to be mindful of are the emotional transitions that we're going on a ride with too. And I think that what I have found in consulting is that so many leaders start a change with their teams and organizations by cheerleading the new beginning and trying to convince everyone about how wonderful this change is going to be at a time When people are still in the first stage of that transition, they're still in the endings. They're thinking about what they're giving up, what's going to be different. They're mourning and they're grieving. Now, here's the tricky thing. They're actually experiencing all three stages at once. It's not this nice linear path, because at the time you're mourning something, you're also feeling very uncertain about it and slightly focused on where this is going in the new beginning. So the way I've talked about these phases in the book as the three stages of transition are in dealing with what was, in dealing with the uncertainty, and in dealing with the what will be. And in the what was, there's a lot of sadness. Even when it's a new year, you know, we're excited for a new year, but we're kind of sad because 2018 was pretty cool. And look at all the work I got accomplished in 2018, and now I have to start all over again. There's a letting go. My baby's getting married in October, my oldest son, and there is a letting go, realizing he won't be coming home to visit in the same way for Christmas next year as he did this year. And I know you can relate to this, Kimberly, yes, having just launched one too.
Yeah.
But there's also an excitement, right, about the new possibilities, whether it's the change in leadership that you're experiencing, or a merger or an acquisition, or a new relationship. There's a lot of possibility. It can be exciting, and there's a little piece of you that's living in that. But when we're really in true change, we're dealing a lot with uncertainty, and we're in that place that TBD is all about, where how it's really going to be is yet to be determined. And we're unclear and we're unsettled. And we want to rush through it as fast as we can. But here's what I'm going to encourage you to do, which is counterintuitive. Much like the fog, where we slow down, I'm going to encourage you to hang in the unsettled and try to appreciate the opportunities it brings. Because it's only in that unsettled state that you get to really explore what else is possible, get creative. You know, people who've lost their jobs and quickly take the next job that comes along, versus the people who lose a job but spend a lot of time really saying, what's important to me now? What really matters to me now? What are all of the possibilities? And I find that people who do that and spend just enough time in that uncertainty really benefit when they come out the other end into the new beginning. So we experience them all simultaneously, and over time we spend less and less time in what was and the uncertainty, and more time into the what will be and that exciting new beginning. So I'm going to pause here and say, if this is resonating with you, please drop a line in the chat room. It is really about getting comfortable being uncomfortable, which sounds a little counterintuitive.
Brenda, there are two comments in the chat room that I thought I'd like to share with you. The first is, why are you using the word transition and not change? It's a question.
Aha. Because the change, the way the Bridges have spelled it out, is the thing you can actually map on your timeline. It's the thing that organizations are pretty good at. They can get their timetable up there on the whiteboard. They can map it out. It's like mapping out, you're selling your home and you're going to move to a new home. You can map it out. You've got to get your house ready. You've got to put it on the market. You've got to show it. You've got to start looking for new homes. Those are all of the actions you can take. But what that doesn't account for, and what I'm calling, and Bridges called, transition, are all of the emotions that are going to come along. If you could almost imagine another line on your whiteboard, this is the emotions line. So it's what's going to happen when you go home and tell your children you're moving. And they get really sad or upset about leaving their neighborhood or their friends or their schools. It's that moment you're going to have when you walk away from those lines on the wall where you had the growth chart for your kids as they were getting older, and knowing that you're leaving that behind. And so they're different things, and they come about simultaneously.
Roland shared this statement with us in the chat room, and I want to read it to you. And he said very much what you're saying is, change is the event. Transition is a psychological adaptation to the change.
And I think the other thing that triggers for me is, and I want to remind everyone about, is we can't dictate how long that emotional transition is going to take. And it's different for everyone, and it may depend on the event. But there isn't a right or wrong amount of time to be in uncertainty. Clearly, we don't want to get stuck there. That's where the next right thing and the low beams come in. Mm-hmm. But we also need to know that it's normal when we are there. Cut ourselves a break. There's this little voice in my head. I talk about it in the book. I call my yama yama, and you all have it. It's the voice in your head that says, you should be moving faster. You shouldn't be feeling so glum. You should be over this already. And I say you can't really get rid of that voice, but it benefits to turn the volume down on it, because it's really shaming you for what is really a human natural reaction.
Adrian shared this statement. She said, uncertainty challenge, : I find leaders and subject matter experts don't like saying, I don't know. So they often create a plan just to have an answer.
Absolutely. And I think as a consultant and time and again in my coaching experiences, I find myself reminding, it's not really a reminder, it almost feels like news to certain leaders, that being able and willing to say, I don't know, will grow the respect that others have for them, because in that vulnerability is a great strength. Mm-hmm. I actually have a colleague of mine who took a position in a company, and early in her tenure, they were in a staff meeting. She was asked a question, sitting at the head of the table as their leader, and didn't know the answer. But she felt she was a new enough leader that she should know the answer. So she fudged it. And she called me that night in an absolute meltdown, because doing that had such backlash on her credibility. I'll be honest, she never recovered from it fully. And she ended up leaving that organization sooner than she probably would have. But it was such a big faux pas that she never could get over it in terms of her reputation.
I really like what L. Michael says, that their president said the same thing: be uncomfortable with be comfortable with the uncomfortable. It is a great lesson and especially beneficial for career development. I like that a lot. Do you feel that you kind of just know when the fog is lifting? I mean, it is kind of apparent when it begins to lift.
I can feel it. I can feel a different energy start to take place. Okay. And, I can see that for myself personally. And I think if we slow down and really check in with ourselves when we're in a busy workplace, we can start to feel that shift too, whether it's with a team and an entire department, or if it's with an individual. But I've been coaching somebody in the past few months whom I don't even recognize. The person that I started to work with 6 months ago and the person who shows up now are not the same person. And he was juggling so many different changes at once and was really having issues, and just helping to move through those and normalize some of what he was going through. His life is just taking on an entirely different, just a whole different appearance, and his staff is even recognizing it and saying so to him.
Roland shared that in some cultures, it's not okay for the leader to say, I don't know. So he believes that we have to think about this differently as we work between and across cultures.
Agreed. And so definitely consider your audience, consider who you're working with, whether it comes to the pacing, right? I'm here in the Northeast, we do everything fast. That's not true across cultures. And I think Roland raises a really good point. Agreed. And so that can be its own psychological transition that practitioners have to experience as they're working across cultures, because it marks a change in the way we interact, do ourselves, and coach others. I think you're actually starting to talk about the next piece I wanted to talk about, Kimberly. You and I had, which is thinking about what you're thinking. So if we think about change as a bad thing, if we think about transition and feelings as something we shouldn't have, we're going to get a certain outcome. But I challenge people to think about what they're thinking. And this was a quote that was shared with me at American University years ago and probably didn't even mean as much to me when I heard it, by Dr. Bob Marshak. And he always said that, think about what you're thinking. And so I wanted to share that as just one of the concepts that I do a deeper dive on in the book, but an important one, right? And it really correlates with a model that some of you may be familiar with. If this is familiar to you, just say yes in the chat room. And that is the ladder of inference. And I think this simple model is so incredibly powerful, because even when you know it, practicing it routinely can be a challenge. To say, oh, wait a minute, what am I thinking about, right? What assumption am I making that is informing my behavior, and how do I want to backtrack on that? And I think that's also true when we're consulting with others too. You know, we're having to manage our own assumptions and conclusions and help others from not jumping too quickly into their own assumptions and conclusions and moving into action. The best way I can describe this is to share a story with you. I have two possible stories. I'm going to share a story of someone I was coaching years and years ago. And she was asked to be coached because the organization wanted to keep her. And they thought she was really valuable. And so they invested in coaching. And they wanted to just provide support and help to her. But there was a whole lot of observable data she could have taken in about that invitation. But what she selected to take in was, I'm getting a coach, there must be something wrong with me that needs to be fixed. The meaning she made of it is they're trying to get rid of me. She assumed she had no value in the department. She concluded she should think about leaving. And she really walked around with that belief system for quite a while. And so then she began acting like she was not valued, not important, and they were trying to get rid of her. And so I simply gave her the assignment of, for 2 weeks, taking a different tact and letting some different data in, which was she was valued, they were investing in her, she was important, they wanted to see her be promoted, not necessarily leave the organization, and see what would happen, and if she could find any proof of it. And when she walked in 2 weeks later, she looked like a completely different person. Before she said a word, I knew she had done her homework. And she is still there at that organization, and this was years and years ago. But this really powerful tool, I think, can be helpful even when we're moving through times of change and transition, to remind ourselves to sometimes pause and think about what we're thinking.
Can you talk a little bit about your transformation clarity card deck? I really enjoyed using it in addition to reading your book.
Yeah, I can. So let me just jump. I got so prepared for you all that there were any number of places we could go. I'm going to jump to the end, so bear with me on this one. This is a card deck that came out of a time of uncertainty, where I was invited to go to New York City to meet with about 100 radio, TV, and print producers. And at the time, most of the people who were going had books, and I didn't have my book ready yet. And so what I did is I designed 10 little cards with content from my book on them that I thought I would take with me, and that would give me something to chat with the producers about. And at the end of that experience, they said to me, you need to make a product out of this. So that was never my dream. But these are cards that have 4 suits to them. It is a suit about questions, conversation you may have to have with yourself or others when you're going through times of change and transition. Information on the back. The second suit is some information about scenarios you may find yourself in and some models and tools to help you through it. The third is the inspiration suit, which has some quotes and some inspirations to help you through your tough time. And the fourth one is the transformation suit, which gives you some actions to turn that time around immediately. And so they are really something that can be used separately or with the book. And in fact, we've done something that we're just getting ready to launch, and the team will be the first to hear about it, the people on the webinar, which is create what we're calling the Now What Transformation Conversation. Because what I believe is that behind every now what is a why not ready to be unleashed. That now what is a place of possibility. And so you can go there and pre-register. We'll be launching it the week of February 11th. But what you will get for that monthly membership is a welcome box, which is super cool. And I'd show you what's in it. The only thing I can tell you is in it is a deck of cards to get you started. I cannot tell you about anything else, or my assistant will really get me, she'll give me a hard time for sharing our surprises. And we've just come out with a promo video as well on that. That is pretty exciting, and we'll be sharing.
Awesome. I try to read one card a day.
I have a leader who says at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon he hits a slump and he really feels like taking a nap. So what he does instead is he calls it his cookie, coffee, and a card hour. He grabs cookie, coffee, and a card, and he figures that the card he draws from the deck is the one he's supposed to focus on for 24 hours. And okay, I'm going to tell you, one of the things you get in your welcome box is a little holder to put your card of the day in.
Oh, awesome.
So there you go.
That's better than a siesta.
Yeah, yeah. It's our way. To be honest with you, I'm doing a lot of speaking. I'm doing a lot of other things with folks, and so I get a quick touch with them, but I don't get this long-term connection with them necessarily. And the Now What Transformation Conversation community is a way of giving people a steady dose of support and connection, because the way in which I consult with people, that is one of my consulting values, is not to just do one and done, here I am, now I'm gone, but to really be able to stay connected. So at this point, Kim, do we have time to take some questions from folks?
Yeah, it's almost 1:45, so we have a little bit of time left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, would you like to, just for fun, do you want to test my technological skills, talk about uncertainty, and see if I can pull up this cute little ad that we've run? I'd love this group's feedback on it. And I'm told that Alt-Tab is my friend, right, Quang?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if I can do this. I'm modeling my own ineptitude.
You're almost there. One more time.
There
you go.
Okay, so have some fun watching this. Just when you begin to feel ready and certain for what's next in life, something unexpected happens. Maybe that change that's occurring for you is allowing you to question what is as good enough and moving you along to something better. And it begs the question, now what? Okay. We will be, as a part of that subscription, we will be taking a deep dive on the content of each of those cards each week. So
you asked for feedback. What kind of feedback would you like to get? You want to get that feedback now?
Sure. Tell me what you think. Or ask any questions you may have. One of the things that I think I'm going to go back to with the time we have is a couple of things. I could talk about all these. This is a little preview of some other things that are in the book, but here's a good reminder for folks. I find that when people are in a time of change, and it's a time when we can feel pretty powerless, But it's nice to remind people that they have lots of more power than we remember. And this was from my mentor. Here he is, Dr. Michael Durst, many years ago. Michael now resides in South Africa. But what Michael always talked about is this ability to respond, right? Responsibility that we need to take during times of change or difficulty. And the 3 choices we always have, and I remind my clients of this all the time. The first one is, how can we change or influence the situation? And that's the first step, if we can do that. And then see what happens. And the second option is, well, it is what it is now. We may have to accept it, at least temporarily. But if we choose to accept it, that means without whining and groaning and moaning. We really have to truly accept it. Otherwise, we may want to consider, how do we get out of this? Whether it's a job that's not suitable for us or a relationship that we're in. But no matter what, we always have those 3 powerful choices.
So you got one feedback from Roland, and he said, it's cool and it piques his curiosity.
Great. Well, I'm also curious about something, which is, I know a number of you are in the midst of going through your own changes and transitions. So as you think about these 3 powerful choices, which of these seems like the thing you are ready and needing to do right now? Is it to try to continue to change and influence your situation? Are you just in a place of having to accept what's going on? Or is it something you have to seriously consider how you can get out of it? So go ahead and tell us what's going on with you.
So Ned says, change influence it and may have to accept some things for now. Simona says, the infomercial was nice to attract and appeal to racial ethnic audience. The people consider taking a closer look when crafting. Lindsay Baker says, get out. That's the third choice. She's exercising.
Be a good movie title too.
Yeah.
All right, great. Some of the other, I'll just give you a little highlight here. Kim, no, I'm gonna put the pressure on Kimberly.
Oh no.
I am. Get ready. Kimberly, you read the book cover to cover. I know that. I remember your book review admitting that you sneaked it into a football game at one time, which
I did.
Warmed my heart to even think of that image of you sitting there in the stands watching, trying to pretend to watch a game and read the book. Is there a specific topic or chapter that intrigued you and you would like to spend some time on?
Oh, wow. Wow. I really liked the TBD mindset. I really like that part. I'm looking at, I just literally flipped and opened chapter 9. And I love the quote here, the anonymous quote, life is like a roller coaster. It has its ups and downs, but it's your choice to scream or enjoy the ride.
Yeah, the most fun part of the whole book was finding the quotes.
Yeah. There are amazing quotes. I remember this one quote just because I read it so many times. I think it's towards the beginning of the book, and it says, change is great. You go first.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's what the book is really meant to highlight for folks, which is we're really good at trying to activate and take action during a time of change, but sometimes the thing we have to get better at is how to be with it. And I think I wrote the book with an audience in mind that really needs to get better at just how to be with it, because it's a natural state we're going to be in a lot. And it's also the importance of the title. You know, it's about being to be, but also about being determined. It's really that polarity, if you will, that we have to leverage between those two states to really manage through. And so I really wrote the TBD mindset as a way of ending the book. Not that any of this is necessarily new under the sun. I'm not pretending it is. But I sometimes think these are the things we need to be reminded of to really keep a TBD mindset. And I just put my newsletter out a few hours ago, and the entire thing looks at feeling and dealing, because New Year's are exciting new beginnings, but isn't there a part of you, and anyone can chime in case it's just me, but isn't there some part of us that says, man, I'm still tired from the last year? Or, gee, now I have this letdown from the holiday and I'm feeling a little depressed with the rain and the snow and the ice and the lack of sunlight, and now I have to push this rock called 2019 uphill again. And so how do we give ourselves a break? And how are we going to recharge, or just, you know, be okay with ourselves and feel the way we're feeling about the new year before we get pumped up and ready to go?
One of my favorite songs right now, I probably shouldn't admit this, but one of my favorite songs is by Ariana Grande, and it's Thank You, Next.
Oh, I love it.
And of course, her song is about relationships, right? But I mean, I think sometimes it takes us too long to move on to the next, right? And so, be like you say, be grateful for your fog, be grateful for your circumstance, and then move on.
The other thing I would highlight here is that I see someone in the chat room mentioned putting the past in its place.
Mm-hmm.
This one is really important in our client systems too. Mm-hmm. It is so easy for them to get stuck in either the way it was or how it's always been, or want to just continue to talk about the past. And what I tend to say to clients is the past only serves one purpose. We want to honor it and learn from it. And so we're going to spend our time honoring it and learning from it, but not dwelling in it, because that is the place that I think many client systems absolutely get stuck.
And I also really like what you say about fun. You know, we can have fun at work, in our lives, right? It's okay to have fun.
Studies are showing more and more the importance of it in the workplace too, because I've got colleagues who have made an entire business out of that.
Yeah.
And it is just going gangbusters lately, because, you know, taking fun breaks even during the day for 10 minutes makes us more productive, clear thinking, bonded with our colleagues.
More creative.
So much value to it. But, you know, I think it's really easy to get in our type A cultural, United States cultural, if we're not doing, if we aren't producing, we aren't valuable. And so again, this is one where we have to think about what we're thinking about fun. Yeah. Which of these others are speaking to you? Go ahead and type that into the chat room. And then I'm going to take the liberty of flashing back here to something else that if you're a practitioner and you are not, don't have this in your background just yet, I just want to make you aware of some really powerful content that is the work of Barry Oshry, who looks at systems thinking and does it, he takes a really complex topic and makes it simple. But so often what we're dealing with in organizations as consultants is the drama that shows up. And so here is my good buddy, Barry, and here is how he looks at an oversimplified model of organizations and all of the spaces that we occupy in organizations. And by the way, we can overlay this on an org chart, but we are in and out of these spaces all day, every day, depending on who we're interacting with. And sometimes it is the impact of the space and the conditions that are ready and waiting for us in those spaces that create a challenge for us. And so knowing that and then being able to be strategic about it can be very helpful. And so just as a little teaser, you know, the space of tops is full of complexity and responsibility. The space of bottoms is all about vulnerability. They use the word they to talk about all of the things that tops and middles are doing that impact bottoms and they feel they have no control over. And when we're in the middle, we're somewhere between tops and bottoms, trying to please everyone and feeling a whole lot of tearing. And our customers often feel neglect anytime something falls short of their stated or unstated expectations. I will tell you, this conceptual framework is one that I use in every piece of consulting that I do. And so you can read more about it in the book. You can learn more about it directly through Power and Systems. And I'm also happy to support anyone who's intrigued by how this could play out for them and their client systems as well. So I'll make that offer.
We have a question from the chat room that says, what does the C stand for?
I'm sorry, customers. Those are your customers or potential customers. Excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that. Yeah. And there's an entire simulation. I just did one last week where you create a system in the room where people are randomly assigned into the space of top, middle, bottom, or customer. And they work 10-minute work days for a week. And all of the dynamics that play out in an organization actually play out in that room with your participants. And that becomes an incredible shared learning experience that you can then leverage to take them to any number of places after that. So I'll just tell people about that, because I think it is this is a model and some important work that a lot of practitioners may not be familiar with, but is super powerful. And it doesn't just apply to work. You know, I'm thinking about this all of the time in my family and my personal life too. You know, we just got through the holidays. Think about it. You know, are you going to go to whose family are you going to spend time with? That puts you squarely in the middle space. You become a new parent, you're squarely in the top space with that newborn, but the day your child throws a hissy fit on the grocery store floor at age 3, you feel pretty bottom to them. So we are really in and out of all of these spaces, and we need to master those and help our clients to better understand them. Most of our clients have no idea of these dynamics that can be sabotaging the work that they're doing, including change initiatives.
Wow. I have learned a lot today.
I don't want to keep going. I think I could overwhelm folks with information. I want to make sure that this was enough to whet people's appetite to learn more. And anybody have additional comments? I am happy to answer them. Otherwise, Kimberly and Quang, I'm going to just go back here. Invite folks to stay connected. I would love that. And even provide feedback about today's webinar. And I know that you'd like to stay connected with them too.
Yes, one, I saw you put the picture of Edie Seashore up there, and I just wish I would have met her at some point in my lifetime. It's a huge, I never had the privilege of meeting her, but one of my favorite articles by her is sometimes you just need one good idea. And I just love that article because, you know, we put so much pressure on ourselves, you know, to have the laundry list, right? And I just, she uses example after example of, she just had one good idea in her consulting work and it changed everything.
Edie could be another hour on the webinar with me if we start talking about Edie. Edie, if you knew her, always wore pearls, a long strand of pearls. And I think there was some superpower in those pearls because she was herself a gem.
Wow.
And the one thing, the gift that she gave me was this one about feedback. They wrote an entire book on feedback. But whenever I've been nervous about giving someone feedback or having to take some in, her quote rings true to me. That whatever receivers do with feedback is totally within their control.
Yep.
They can reject all of it or any part of it, swallow it whole or spit it out, distort it, adore it, hate it, forget it, or remember it forever. My job is to give it in a way that it might be able to be received, but what people do with it is ultimately up to them. And this helps me when it comes my way too. So I like to share this as well with leaders to know that they shouldn't be too scared of giving and getting feedback.
That's awesome. You know, I had such a great time today. I could go on and talk about this topic forever, but I would like to, first of all, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, guys, both of you.
I'd also like to encourage those that are on the chat to check out the International Society for Organization Development and Change. We are a crazily committed group, is that okay to say, that of people who want to change the world and make it a better place on so many different levels, from the scholarly level to the practitioner level. We have newsletters, we have webinars such as this. We have collaborative opportunities, we have special student opportunities, but most of all, I think we have a network of friends in a collegial environment that will strengthen anybody's practice. So I really encourage you to go to isodc.org and check out our organization.
May I do one selfish shout out, Kimberly?
Yes, absolutely.
To Roland, whom I met at a time when I was in a session with Edie Seashore in Bethel, Maine. And I'll skip the entire long, ugly story on my behalf where I was having a meltdown and Roland saved my day. But that is how he and I got connected, and it is how you and I now have gotten connected too. So a big shout out and thank you to Roland for that.
It truly is a small, amazing world, isn't it? And I would like to encourage you to go to isodc.org to check out. We have a wonderful webinar coming up next month as well. And I'd like you to check that out. It's on leading strategic innovation and change with Mr. Al Blixt. And so we'd love to have you join us. And I'd also like to remind you that a link will go out shortly to those who have registered for the webinar, and you will be able to replay it. I think I'm going to listen to it probably at least once or twice. So again, just to make sure I get everything from the webinar. And be sure to make this a great day, everyone, okay? And call someone who would want to hear from you. I think it would probably make both their day and yours.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for great engagement today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.